And welcome. I'm Dean Perrine, EVP at JSA, and I'll be the event host and moderator. I have a question for you. Are you ready to rumble? Because that's what we're going to do. We've got an action-packed discussion for you this afternoon. Our topic is the fight for the best low latency network, and it's sure to be a knockout. That's because we've got an all-star lineup, quite literally an all-star lineup. Let's go ahead and meet them now. We have Mr. Mike Persico. Mike is the CEO and founder of Anova Financial Networks. We'll talk to Mike about Anova's fight to be the best of breed financial networks that are revolutionizing the financial trading industry with lightning speed, affordability, and reliability. We also have Mr. Dave "The Hammer" Schultz, a retired NHL hockey player. Dave was one of the most notable enforcers on the Philadelphia Flyers' famous Broad Street Bullies. Dave also won 2 Stanley Cups with the Flyers in the 1973 and 74 season and the 74 and 75 season. We'll chat with Dave "The Hammer" about his battle to the top of his professional hockey career. So from the ice to the trading floor, this is all about achieving success. So Mike and Dave, or Hammer, welcome to the event. Thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Yes, thank you.
So do you go by Mr. Hammer or just Hammer, or are we doing Dave?
You're the CEO. Just call me Dave.
All right, Dave and CEO Mike. But before we get started, I'd just like to remind our audience to feel free to participate in this discussion. You can do so by putting your questions and comments in the chat field right there on your desktops, and we will be sure to get to those questions and comments best we can in the time we have allotted. Guys, let's go ahead and jump right in. Mike, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Let's give us a little bit of a primer on Anova. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of Anova and your company's climb to the top to deliver the fastest financial networks?
Sure. So, you know, we're an 11-year-old vintage right now. We started in 09, and you know, the goal was always to optimize connectivity between liquidity centers. And that's what it was back then, and it still is today. But the mediums have changed over time, and the criteria a little bit, but then, you know, as I'll talk about later, not so much. But when we were originally founded, it was all fiber. You know, wireless hadn't yet hit the scene, and, you know, we called ourselves an engineering firm that had carrier-like services. Since then, you know, we've kind of figured out that if you look like a duck, you walk like a duck, you talk like a duck, you're a duck. You know, so we're certainly more carrier today than ever before, given our footprint and our pops. But we never lost the engineering focus. And you know, to us, it's about taking something that has been done before and optimizing it, or innovating something from scratch. And those end up being our MO and our mantra, you know, and it's carried us through this decade plus. After we deployed fiber for several years, you know, wireless hit the scene, and we were the first one to deploy a metro network connecting the New York Stock Exchange, the largest equities exchange in the world, to BATS, which has since been purchased by Cboe, but they were the 3rd largest equity exchange in the world. And so, you know, we built a tranche of connectivity, and it sold out in 6 hours. And it was that point from that point on, that every one of our CapEx dollars went to building wireless greenfield networks. And so really, if you want to know who we are, we're a wireless financial industry carrier. However, I won't discount fiber completely. It still makes up a good 1/3 of our revenue, and we do sort of have a host of industry-leading routes. And so, thanks for I was going to say thanks for having me, but we put this on, so,
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Right, yeah. So thanks for hosting, Dean. Joe, thanks for putting this on. And Dave, I really appreciate you being here. This should be fun.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah. We're gonna have a good time, and let's get into that good time. So, Mike, you were talking about doing things that had been done before. Dave knows a little bit about that. Dave, you made some history yourself. You are renowned as one of hockey's greatest enforcers, and hold the NHL record for the most penalty minutes in a single season at 472. I'm sure sports buffs and some of our other audience probably knew that. I didn't, and it came as quite a shock. Could you tell us a little bit about your path growing up in Saskatchewan to ultimately being a star in the NHL and doing things that have never been done before?
Well, I've never heard some of those words that Mike just gave before. First 8 years of my life, I lived on a farm in northern Saskatchewan. No running water, no electricity, no indoor plumbing. That's how I grew up my first 8 years. And then we moved to town, and I got playing hockey. And I played junior hockey in Western Canada. And after 3 years, I was 20 years old at the time, and I got drafted by the Flyers. And I had to make a decision on whether to go to college, get a college education, or make my play at professional hockey. And to be honest with you, being 20, I mean, grade 6 wasn't going that well anyway. That was supposed to be funny.
I liked it. It was good.
Anyway, all the guys that are on here are laughing like crazy. Anyway, so then I got drafted by the Flyers and played 3 years in the minors, went to the Flyers and won a couple Stanley Cups, and I played a total of 11 years of professional hockey. So it was, again, playing in Philadelphia was the greatest. Again, winning those 2 cups, then losing in the finals in '76. But so yeah, it's I basically lived here most of the time since I retired, which was in 1980 when I was with the Buffalo Sabres. But that's how I made it, and it's a lot of hard work and a lot of mistakes and a lot of preparation.
Of course. So when I was a young kid, I was a big Chicago Cubs fan, and growing up, I was always going to be the next second baseman for the Chicago Cubs. Physically, it just didn't work out for me, So, but did you always know that you wanted to be a hockey player?
Well, when you grew up in Saskatchewan, 30, 40 below in the winter, I mean, what else is there to do but play hockey? And my biggest, again, there was only 6 teams in the NHL. Okay, by the time I got drafted in '69, it was 12 teams. But my hero was Dave Keon, played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that's who I wanted to play like, and that's who I tried to emulate. But when I got drafted by the Flyers, I went to training camp, and my whole life changed. I got sent to Salem, Roanoke, Virginia in the Eastern Hockey League, the movie Slapshot. Okay, that's where that came from. And I got in a fight my first game, and I got in a fight my second game, and that continued on for 11 years. And so, by the time I got to the Flyers 3 years later, I'd been doing a little bit of fighting. And again, it was part of the game. Not that it's not part of the game anymore, but it was really part of the game. Somebody ran one of your teammates. Someone had to take care of them. And it deterred a lot of cheap shots.
Of course. So, Mike, there's a lot of fighting going on in your industry as well.
Oh, what a segue. Look at that.
That's why they pay me the big bucks, guys.
That's right.
But there's a lot of fighting that goes on in your industry, in our industry, and probably any industry that has the competitive spirit that most most businesses do. But you guys are constantly kind of pushing the envelope and moving forward and improving and tweaking and innovating and doing all of those kinds of things. So with that, taking that into consideration and knowing that there are millions of kids just like me who wanted to be the second baseman for the Chicago Cubs, it wasn't gonna happen for me.
Mm-hmm.
What makes Anova different from some of the others maybe that it isn't happening for, or how are you beating them? How are you staying on top and being a leader?
Mm-hmm. So I do want to let Dave know, though, that we did get a comment from the gallery saying that everyone there is laughing, that your joke was good. So
Yes.
you got affirmation from just more than us two. And, you know, Dean, maybe next time what we should do is you should get like a little laugh track. You know, somebody puts out a good one, you could hit the button and, you know, we hear it, we get that feedback. Right?
I'm learning as we go, Mike.
Right. So, you know, I think about competition and, you know, in the wireless space, there's so much competition. And, you know, I think the trading firms compete with one another as well. And I think we do amongst the wireless vendors in a very similar vein. And it takes an awful lot of reinvestment and reinvention. I think that's the answer that I would give is that, you know, sometimes I 5 years ago, I used to say, well, we're Anova 2.0. And I've really kind of lost what version we are now, because you constantly have to reinvent yourself. And because if you don't, someone else will. And either it'll be a new company or someone else is pushing the limits. And so, you know, that's a hard thing to focus on for a long period of time. It's exhausting, but it's also rewarding. You know, it makes the job so interesting that you constantly have to live on the cutting edge or even the bleeding edge. I mean, you know, the way that I see financial industry connectivity is that we do things that the regular carriers wouldn't, that AT&T wouldn't, that Verizon wouldn't. And we put them to the market sometimes a decade before anybody else. And then you hear something like, I'll give you a perfect example. Verizon and AT&T and all those folks are putting out 5 gig networks. Well, guess what they're using? They're using millimeter wave radios. Guess what we deployed in our very first network in 2011? Millimeter wave radios. Now, Cricket had done it before that, but the point is that no one really thought that it was viable. And we put it out and the customers started using it, and there was a real business case as to develop as to how to actually deploy this and profit from this. And so, you know, we're always out there on the cutting edge and we're constantly doing it, and that's demanding, but like I said, rewarding. And I think that's the difference. If you want to know what separates us from what I'll call a more traditional carrier, that's what it is. They don't have the palate for that. They don't have the appetite for that. They don't have the personnel for that. They don't espouse that as a perspective. You know, when they deploy CapEx, they're like, if we get paid back in 13 years, that's fine. You know, if we waited 13 years for a return on our investment, I wouldn't be sitting here. You know, it'd be someone else or there'd be no Anova. And so that's sort of, you know, our world, and it sounds a little crazy, but I think the people on this call know exactly what I'm talking about, because everyone has to go through this in some sense.
Yeah, you know, and we all go through that. The one thing that really jumped out that you were saying, Mike, was reinvention. And really like taking and examining what you're doing, how you're doing, when you're doing it, and kind of pushing that envelope. Obviously with the pandemic, and there's a whole lot of reinvention going on. But Dave, question for you. Have you ever thought about reinventing your style of hockey play, going from the enforcer to maybe the nice guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. And I will tell you, Mike, you're successful because you're like we had with the Flyers, leadership from the top. It starts at the top and goes down. You know, and Ed Snyder was our owner and our leader. We had a great general manager, Keith Allen, and our coach, Fred Scherer, was very, he looked at hockey a little bit different. He studied the Russians and all that kind of stuff. So it sounded like, to me, like, I mean, that's what you need. You need that edge and leadership. You know, for me, I mean, the game has changed so dramatically since the 70s, even before that. Of course, the biggest change is the amount of money these guys make. But the style of the game, they had to speed it up, and they're better athletes because they train. We used to spend the summer drinking beer on the beach at a lake in northern Saskatchewan. Okay, and they train almost year round, so everything changes. The game's changed, and it's still a great game, fast. These young guys, they got all kinds of speed, and a hell of a lot more speed than I had. But again, staying on top, changing, making changes, and not be afraid to make changes is what's important.
I love it. And I also love that we're actually getting some questions in now. And I believe that this one is for you, Dave. So I'm going to take it really quick. It says, "Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us today." So thank whoever wrote in. Thank you for saying as much. Can you talk to us on how you may still be staying involved in hockey these days? Are you coaching at all, perhaps? In that vein, what was the best or hardest lesson you learned working together as a team through challenges? So question number one, are you still involved in hockey? Number two is, what are the best lessons that you learned through the challenges of playing hockey?
Well, I did go into coaching a number of years ago. I love coaching, but I kind of got out of the game for too long, and get back in. The game was changing, but I really enjoyed that. And now I do some public relations for the Philadelphia Flyers. I live in this area, and so I go to games, me and a couple other guys, and greet fans and say hi to them and that kind of thing. But again, teamwork is the key to success. My key to success, which is really for everyone, for every athlete, and you, Mike, and you got to envision. You got to. If you can see it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. You got to be able to envision it. And I used to, a lot of guys, I fought a couple hundred times in my career, and most of the time, those guys who I knew sometimes who I was going to fight, and I'm not. I would imagine, as I had a little nap in that afternoon, the guy lost a number of times in my head that afternoon, and damn it, if I didn't, the game started and the guy came towards me, and what could I do? Just react and beat the hell out of him. Try it.
That's the first time that I've heard positive mental realization as it pertains to a hockey fight. You can fight in all sorts of business and all sorts of areas, but never in a hockey fight. I like it.
Oh, I used to imagine fighting certain guys, because I knew if I was going to fight anybody, it was going to be a couple different guys on different teams. And I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew exactly. And hopefully obviously they didn't sometimes think about it as much as I did. And again, once you become that type of a player, protecting your players, in essence, being an enforcer, you kind of get a reputation. And I mean, when the fans were some guy ran one of my teammates in my home building, and the fans started yelling, "We want Schultz." They weren't asking for a couple of goals.
Right.
They wanted me to. And usually, if it didn't happen the next shift, the next period, or maybe the next game, but it definitely happened. And it wasn't just me myself. I had a number of other guys who could handle themselves quite well, and we protected our own. And that's what hockey players do. That's why there was fighting in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike, when the Anova team starts chanting, "We want Persico," and
Right.
you've got to meet a challenge, how do you do it? You know, why don't you give us an example of a challenge that you had and how you met it?
You know, I would think that ours are really technical in nature, because when you think about a wireless network that we use on our cell phones, right? If you lose a cell tower, you get half a bar less, right? But you still have connectivity, you know, because those networks are omnidirectional, right? We build point-to-point networks. We build networks that go from A to B. So if you lose a site or you can't access a site from A to B, then the entire network is down because it's a contiguous path. And so our challenge is how to balance this availability that the customers need with the latency that people want, because frankly, that's why where people are getting market data over this medium or entering orders over this medium. You know, it needs to be fast. And then you've got this kind of third leg to the stool of capacity. And so early on when we built these networks, I would laugh and I say, you've got three variables: latency, availability, capacity. Pick two, because I can't get you three. Mm-hmm. And that was a very sort of flippant answer, and it was true at the time. But as this segment has evolved, it is truly people want all of those things, or you have different groups that force rank one of those to be more important. So it's not a scenario where one network fits all, and so the challenge becomes, how do we develop technology that can satisfy the demands of the markets of the widest breadth of the marketplace? And so that comes over time. You start with a building block and then you add features. You know, it's the common axiom: how do you move a mountain? One pebble at a time. You know, because if a problem is really large, you can't solve it overnight. And I think that us being willing to commit to the long haul and say, in 10 years, we're still going to be here. When you sit across the table from someone and they know that, and they know that you're not there just because it's the gold rush du jour, that you say, in a decade, I'm going to be sitting here across the table from you, and we're still going to be doing business, that carries a lot of weight. And so when we commit to the long haul, that allows us to solve complex problems over time, because complex problems are hard and you can't solve them quickly. And so there's this dedication and commitment to focus on a problem, and then you can ultimately solve it. And so I think that's what I try to push downstream to our group, is that, we always have to be moving forward. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower, but in the end, we get there.
Excellent. Similar question, a challenge, a hurdle that you faced in your career and how you overcame it?
Repeat that.
A particular challenge or hurdle that you encountered in your career and how you overcame that hurdle?
Yeah, Clark Gillies.
What was that?
Clark Gillies was a big problem I had. 6'3", 225. Anyway, the key to the whole thing is visualizing and being ready every game. That's what you got to do. You got to mentally prepare. Some days you do better than others, but you've got to be mentally and physically prepared. And so, I faced a lot of challenges, particularly when after my Flyers days and winning a couple Stanley Cups and then getting traded, those were tough times. I mean, you go to a new team and you have to adjust to that, but I guess probably the toughest adjustment I've had to make is when I got out of the game, and I didn't have a college education, and So, you try and we didn't make any money. So, I didn't have a lot of money just in my bank account to fall back on. Give me some time to, so those have been challenging times for me.
Kind of off script a little bit, because you talked about that kind of mental and physical preparation. Was there ever a time when physically you don't think you could have done it, but mentally you were strong enough to get it done? Is that something that happens with professional athletes as well?
Yeah, sometimes you as prepared as you are, you're not going to have success, but you still have to be, get back at it the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can be. Again, sometimes you're with the right team, or playing well, and the team's playing well. We had a great team in Philadelphia. We had great leadership. Bob Clark was by far as good a leader as has ever been in any sport. And you just kind of follow the guys and do your thing. But you've certainly got, for me particularly, even a forward, a guy who scores goals, a good defenseman, a goalie, you got to be prepared. And so that was again, it was always easy when you're playing with a good team.
Okay, guys, we've talked about challenges for the most part. Now let's talk about successes and some milestones in your respective careers. Mike, we'll start with you. A milestone that you may have hit that maybe when you went into this venture, you thought, if we can hit this, then I know that we are a success. Are there any of those milestones for you?
Yeah, I tend to not set long-term goals because having achieved them in the past, once you do that, you're rudderless. So it's if anyone out there has had that same experience, I'd love to hear it because, now that doesn't mean that we're not striving for things. But if you're only looking for one thing and you get it, then, you say, what's next? And that what's next is a little bit of an empty feeling. And so I'm talking something you chase for 5 or 7 years, that's a real long-term goal. But, in terms of successes, we've had a lot, like I talked about the first metro wireless network between exchanges, the first dual spectrum network built in the world. And when I say dual spectrum, it combined millimeter wave and free space optics. And the first 10-kilometer free space optics link, so we've had a lot, and I don't want to get too far into the technical jargon, but it's funny because when I think about successes that are kind of innovative centric, I think that it's important to remember that with every success, there's actually more failure, and you can't be afraid to fail. And that's really the people that can push past failure are the ones that will ultimately succeed. And I'll give you a story. In 2014, we won a Chicago Innovation Award. And there's 10 or so that win every year, and it's not a pay to play, right? There's real voting, real judging. They come to your headquarters. You show them their technology. They have experts that come and evaluate it, and it's a pretty hotly contested thing. And we were fortunate enough to win in 14 for our dual spectrum, our hybrid radios. And so I got up, and there was 5,000 people in the audience, right? And you get up and you bring your team up and you get to say a few words. And I said, I was thinking about this in my seat, and this should really be called the Chicago Failure Awards, because everyone who's on this stage knows how hard it was to get here and how many missteps there were, and the people and the dedication that you had to push through to ultimately succeed. I said, now, we never passed the marketing people, right? It's got a terrible ring to it, the Chicago Failure Award.
Yeah, we would not allow that.
Exactly. You never let me use that, Dean. But I think that's important to note here is that behind all the success are the missteps and the ability to push past that and ultimately achieve success.
Excellent. Dave, same question. We've been talking about challenges, and as Mike duly noted, those challenges are made, and overcoming those challenges and those failures, the successes are that much sweeter. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, some success milestones in your career, and where did you relax after that, or did you just keep going?
You keep going, but I will tell you that, in sports, in hockey, we played, usually 2 or 3, sometimes 4 games a week. But if you fail one game, you get ready for the next one, and hopefully you have some success. And then you have to look at, the whole team, the team as a whole for the season, not too many players look at it like this is looking at the whole career. Guys who had phenomenal careers, played 14, 15 years, they just got it done. They made had a lot of failures, but a lot of, they probably had way more talent than myself. So again, for me personally, just making it out of junior hockey and getting drafted was a first step. Then playing, 3 years in the minors, but then winning the championship in Philadelphia in '74 and '75. Here I'm halfway through my career, really. And what do you do after that? Well, you have to reevaluate, or you have to get ready for the next season. And again, that was some of my difficult parts, particularly for me. I guess I've never had a street fight in my life. Okay, never. I was pretty, I'll call myself a chicken, whatever. Okay, when I was a kid, but once you start fighting, particularly in the years that I did, it's expected.
Yeah.
So I had to be ready every game, every year. And sometimes it's easy to kind of mellow a little bit. And somewhat that happened to me. And guys kept getting bigger. I was 6'1", 200 pounds. I wasn't 6'5", 240. But again, you gotta keep going, and then your career ends. Then you've got to do something else, and that you have no training for. But anyway, so.
So we do have a question that just came in, one that I actually was going to ask at the end if we didn't have any questions, but it did come in. Do you have any rituals, or did you have any rituals or superstitions? And if so, can you share some of those? Any pregame rituals or anything like that?
I tried. You've seen athletes that you can tell they have rituals before a game. They do this, Remember Hextall played for the Flyers. He would tap the net 3 times with a stick, and then anyway. Certain guys, they have to be out the dressing room first. They have to tap their, all these things. And I'm going like, I don't want to get into that. I'd drive myself crazy. I did though tell you that I used to, because nobody wore helmets back then, okay, for the most part. But I used to tape my hand up a little bit. I'd put some stickum on it, just to kind of hold it in place. So I would go out for warm up without that, and then I'd come back in. I'd tape my fist up a little bit, and just in case I got in a good fight. And in Montreal in '74, this guy stuck a stick between my legs, and I just nailed him. And he went down and like he was, dead. They brought in a new rule. You can't put any foreign substance on your hand. If you do and you hurt someone, you get a game misconduct. That's my ritual. Okay, that was my ritual. Again, you have little things. You put your one pat on at first and the other. But yeah, you know, I think most people have those kinds of things.
Very good. I'm just checking to see if we have anything more coming in. I think we are good to keep going. Okay. Okay, Mike, for you, what would you want your customers to take away from Anova's fight in this complex market? So your customers, they see you fighting in the market. What do you want them to see? What do you want them to take away from it?
Yeah, you know, I think that our message is always that I talked about it a little bit, but that we're reinvesting in what we do, and but we also have so many differentiators. You know, a couple of those that I would talk about is, you know, we're probably the only carrier that has their own dedicated FPGA engineers. So that's an anomaly. Those of people out there that are from the trading firms, they have them, you know, and they may sit next to them, right? But, well, not anymore, right? Unless typically, you know, employees don't live with one another. But the so
that's an HR problem, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, so we've made this investment to build feature sets to add on top of our underlying technology, so that we can own that, we can tune that, we can adapt it to what the marketplace is demanding. And so, you know, FPGA guys aren't cheap, right? These are very well paid, well bonused employees. And frankly, you know, they're always under duress of, you know, being picked off by a headhunter. So, you know, they're really in demand. But we've made that commitment, and we have that sort of department within our organization because we feel that that's a differentiator, you know, our ability, so that we're not subservient to a third-party vendor, where if you bring them something that you'd like to be implemented, they say, well, you know, how much are you going to pay me? And then how many of your competitors can I sell it to? So we really like the concept of being able to build and manage and own our own technology and our own feature sets, because we think that we can deploy it to the market quicker. And we think that we can respond when people want to add things. The other part that I think is a differentiator, which is, you know, how I'm answering your question, which is what do I want people to think about for us? Because you know, there's many firms, well, 3 firms that predominantly offer wireless networks, but how are we different is we have our own tower climbing business. And, you know, it's a wholly owned subsidiary, and we have almost double digits in terms of headcount. It may have just crossed that. And so the reason that that's important is because these networks go down. They are fallible. And so anyone who's used these products, ours and other people's, know that that's just a part of it, right? But the ability to have your own dedicated headcount that doesn't work for any of the carriers, that doesn't do backhaul installations, that they're always there on the ready, W-2 employees of a wholly owned subsidiary of Anova, means that we can repair and maintain networks quicker than the competition. And I think if downtime is lost opportunity when you're in the markets, our ability to minimize that, I think, really sets us apart.
Minimizing downtime. How's this for a segue? So Dave, would you say that you had won more fights or lost more fights? I know you've been in that penalty box a lot. Were you ever like knocked out cold?
Pardon me? No. I broke my hand, fingers or something, you know, a few things like that. But no, I was, and that's one of the things again, I probably had about 250 fights throughout my 11 years. And I lost a few here and there, but that's one of the things you're concerned about is someone giving you a shot, they get a lucky shot in or whatever, and it could affect you mentally for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
Thank God that didn't happen to me. But again, it's interesting. Sometimes I go like, where would have I been? I would have got an education and I would have done something in the real world. And that's been a battle for me is to, I'm in sales. Okay. People know who I am, particularly in the Philadelphia area. And so that's been somewhat, pretty successful for me. But yeah, that was something I was always concerned about, taking that one hit to the head. Of course, everybody thinks I got, a number of concussions.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I didn't fight guys who were 240 pounds and they trained to fight. So we didn't hit as hard back then. And therefore, I might have had a couple slight concussions, but nothing more than that.
So I'm going to stay off script for just a little bit. So Dave, we've talked a lot about your professional, your hockey career, your challenges, your successes, and all of that stuff. But you don't do that anymore. You're living, as you just said, kind of in this real world. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you took that professional athlete mindset and brought it to the real world?
Well, the first thing I did as soon as I retired, I took the Dale Carnegie course, okay, which taught me a lot. And over the last number of years, I studied a guy named Bob Proctor. Very motivational type goal setting, and those things, which people all across this, the workforce across this country do. And that was, again, the key though is you try and take what you learned as a professional athlete and take it into the real world. It's not that easy, but if you again work hard, focus, and visualize your success just like your people do, then you have a shot at it.
And so looking back on your career, let's just say from your professional hockey career to your now career in sales, how would you want someone to look at you, to remember you?
Well, I can't say that I'm a multi-millionaire in sales. Okay. In fact, one of the problems I've had is, I don't have it anymore, but I would drink too much. And that's a byproduct of sometimes of being a professional athlete. You drink a lot. And not so much when you're playing as and because there's a lot of things that have taken place in my life that have caused me problems. And there's a lot of things that I focus on and again, have I been as successful as I'd like to be? No. But, you keep working at it. Of course, at my age now, I'm basically, I'm not retired, but I wish I could be retired. Some athletes do way better than others after their careers than some do. And I could have done a lot better.
So what I would take away from this conversation with you is humility. You seem like, you're a professional athlete. You've achieved these things that 99.9% of us never achieve. And yet you're saying there's more I could have done. So, if there's a takeaway for me, that's it. But Mike, same question for you too. You've done a lot, and Anova has done a lot. What's next? What are we going to do next for you?
So, like I said, it's sort of never ending. And we like it that way. There's no resting on your laurels. And so we have a product that we acquired back in a platform, if you will, that we acquired back in 2016. And, it was the dual spectrum platform. And we've since, let's say, I want to say upgraded it, but I'd also say enhanced it to the point where it now operates at 10 gigabit per second. And what that means is it has 10 times the capacity. Just like that's important, everybody wants bigger download speeds, on your Comcast or your internet pipe, because your videos load faster or your movies download faster. It's the same thing, right? Capacity can be a tacit speed enhancement. And so, we have this product, this 10 gig laser product. It literally is a laser, the same one that's in your remote control. So you use it's an infrared laser. You use it to change your channel from one football game to the next, or one hockey game to the next. We're sending the world's financial data over it. And instead of 10 feet, we're sending it 10 kilometers. But inherently, the technology is the same. And so this is our latest and greatest. This is what we're so excited about. And we're going to take this product and we're going to redeploy it on all of our existing networks, so that people get this forklift upgrade to this 10 times the capacity. Now, my operations people are so incredibly tired of building the same network 3 times, right? But that's the name of the game. This is what we all signed up for here, but hopefully this platform, we believe that it can get us to 40 gig per second. We believe that with this same equipment, we can go 4x from where we are now. And if it can be field upgradable, all the better. Because I think if we have to build Secaucus to Mahwah again, I might lose half my technical staff. So that's a joke, but look, that's what we want to do. We want to canvas the world with 10 gig FSO as it pertains to connecting the world's financial liquidity centers.
Amazing. There's a lot to digest here. Unfortunately, we have approximately 15 minutes left. So I'm going to let this no holds barred thing happen. And we're going to start taking more questions from the audience. And then I will try to wrap up. We don't have a whole lot of time, guys, but I'm going to just go in. Question from the audience to, they're calling you Mr. Schultz, and probably wise to do so. Mr. Schultz, big fan here. My question to you is, given the physical style of play that the Flyers had become famous or infamous for, especially during the championship years, were there fights that would break out frequently during team practices? And who would you say was the player that you would least likely want to face from an opposing team's perspective?
Well, we couple times in the minor leagues, I got in a couple skirmishes with a couple of my teammates, but that's not a good thing to do. Certainly never in the National Hockey League. Now you were asking who there were some tough guys around the league you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Who is the one that you would least likely want to face from an opposing team's perspective? So who did you not want to have to play?
I did not want to have to play the Boston Bruins. I fought Terry O'Reilly 8 times. So it's not something I wanted to do, but I wanted to fight a couple of the smaller teammates, but he'd skate up and get in the middle, and we fought 8 times. And there's a lot of other guys that I fought Clark Gillies a couple times. He's a big tough guy, and many others. But so yeah, you knew on each team, where particularly on the road back then, when the team was at home, they were probably going to have a little bit more whatever, okay, than if they were in our building. Some guys used, they had the Philadelphia flu a lot of times, but yeah, there was a lot of guys, and you had to be ready for them all. I, with my reputation, couldn't afford to lose, and I did a couple times, but, the newspapers would put it on the front page. But, so yeah, you always had to be ready, and it was tough.
So, Mike, question from me as far as being ready. Nobody could have predicted 2020. There was a lot of pivoting happening at the beginning of the year. Why don't you tell us quickly about how Anova pivoted given the pandemic and just that kind of the uncertainty perhaps of the market, uncertainty of your own people and where they would actually be working from. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we went through some of the same trials and tribulations that everybody else did, which was how to take inherently on-site workforce and give them the tools and the access that they needed to work from home. And the most challenging department for us was accounting. I mean, if you think about your back office, historically, those people are supposed to stay inside the firm. You don't make your software available, outside the business. It's on a server and it's in your communications room and it's under lock and key, right? And so the ability to sort of transition to something that could securely give people access was something we had to focus on initially. And I have to say, we've really been of the opinion from a management philosophy that being all in one place contributed to the collective, right? It was all of our expertises coming together to form the holistic information and abilities of the company. And that if you lost that, you wouldn't have the interaction that you needed to progress. You wouldn't have the culture that you were trying to build. You wouldn't have the morale. And while I think those things are certainly a part, are still, you have to be cognizant of it, and you have to do things like this. But we were actually surprised that we could keep productivity at such a high level. I, for one, being more of a traditionalist and being more old school, thought that we would have a precipitous drop off. But it's a credit maybe to the people, that work for us, maybe to some of the things where we tried to keep everyone together. But we were able to navigate that period and keep productivity up. And I got to tell you, there's certain aspects of this COVID time that are gonna stick around. And this concept of remote working, I think, is going to be embedded into a lot of workplaces going forward. And it's interesting because we're probably okay with that now.
Yeah.
Where 12 months ago it was a non-starter. So so I think we have to rethink a lot of things and during these times, and we're open to that because I think that our whole industry is predicated on not being static and being able to be creative and be open and change.
Yes, I hear you. Dave, a couple more questions from the gallery. Who is your favorite hockey player right now?
Wayne Gretzky. Just kidding. I don't know if I have one today. I don't see a lot of the games. I know that this kid McDavid out of Edmonton is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. He's got speed. It's unbelievable. The Flyers have had kind of a subpar years over the last number of years, and so there's no one that is my favorite. But anyways,
I thought you would have said Eric Lindros. No.
No. He was a good hockey player, and unfortunately, he had some concussions and was pushed out of the game. Basically, he got traded to the Flyers, and he did go into the Hockey Hall of Fame, which means he dominated the league for at least half a decade. Mm-hmm. So he was a great hockey player. But my favorite hockey player of all time, Bobby Orr. He was the greatest. You know, and again, not that Gretzky wasn't, but that was a different era. I played against Orr, and great hockey player.
How about you, Mike? Who's your favorite?
You know, I don't watch hockey as much today, but you know, I'll go back to the era when we did go to the games and whatnot, and I was always a big JR fan. Jeremy Roenick, liked him a lot. My son, for some reason, he doesn't play anymore, but he likes Patrick Sharp, also a Black Hawk, but you know, kind of an odd pick. But I was a JR guy.
Well, Patrick Sharp, what a career he's had. I mean,
Yeah.
Years. But, you know, I also got to bring in who's one of the greatest player, the greatest leader. Okay, maybe not the greatest player, but Bob Clark. Played 15 years, and he was our leader. Without him, we wouldn't have won the Stanley Cup. And so he's one of my favorites.
So was Dale Rolfe of the Rangers ever on your Christmas card list?
Still waiting for a card from him.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel bad. You know, when I kind of beat him up a little bit there in the finals, in Game 7 of the semifinals, we went on to win that game and win that series, and then we went on to beat the Boston Bruins 4-2. This is in 70.
All right, guys, we've got 4 minutes. I have got one question left. Really, it's more of a question statement, and then we're going to get to our raffle winner. But Dave, I understand that you've had a brief singing career. Is that correct?
What's your next question?
My next question is, I understand you've had a brief singing career. Is that correct?
It was brief, all right. This guy wrote you know, this is in 75, and you know, when you're winning and you're having success, you know, all this kind of stuff, people can talk you into about anything, because I can't sing, but I did. This guy Cal Mann, who wrote. He used to write for Elvis Presley. He wrote this song, the Penalty Box, and I tried to sing it, and again, it wasn't much of a. It was successful in Philly. They played it every 15 minutes, so
yeah.
it was right ahead of Elton John's Freedom Song.
Like, can you look it up? Like, or do you have a 45 of it? Are there copies?
Yeah, just go online.
Well, look at that.
You heard that?
That should have been the soundtrack for what we opened with, Dean.
I know. Again, I'm learning, Mike. I am learning as we go along.
You can hear it on. I can listen to it right now if I wanted to.
Okay, put it on. We'll use it as our out music.
That's right. That's our outro.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I've got one more question. What was your favorite or most memorable goal that you scored?
Oh wow. I scored so many. I don't remember them all.
So they were all memorable.
Yeah. I mean, I did score 20 goals one season, and so that's a pretty good benchmark in the National Hockey League, or at least it was then. But you know, I played in so many great games. Certainly the Stanley Cups. Again, those are always best of 7, so it's not like it's one game. But you know, we also played the Red Army, the Soviet Union, in 1976,
Yeah.
and they played 4 games against the National Hockey League, and we were they beat 2 and tied Montreal, and then they had to come to Philly to meet the city of brotherly love, the Broad Street Bullies. And a lot of people all over the world would watch that game, and we beat them 4-1. And, you know, so, but as far as my favorite, a goal, I scored 2 hat tricks in 2 weeks in one season. So,
So with that, guys, I feel like we could probably speak all night, maybe have a burger and a beer and really get into some of these stories. Unfortunately, that's really all the time we have. We have exactly 1 minute, and I've got a few things to talk about. We have a raffle winner, and that raffle winner is Mr. Mark Devaney. I assume that I'm getting that right. Mark Devaney, you are the raffle winner, and I believe that you are getting a jersey of your choice. So congratulations, Mark, on, I think that's what it is. But I think, guys, that's it. The overall takeaways is that success comes in many, many flavors. And whether you're in business or a professional athlete, or a professional athlete who's now in business, or a business owner who's going to be a professional athlete, success is really kind of measured in much the same way. So guys, thanks again for success, determination, preparation, all of those things. Guys, thanks very much for joining me today. That is all the time we have. Best of luck to you and Dave and Mike, and happy 2021. We're almost there.
Oh,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
so much.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.